Welcome to Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast with Robert Hyder. This is a no-fluff podcast where we dig deep into the journey of scaling your real estate investing and wholesaling business and discuss how to break into commercial real estate investing. Robert Hyder here with Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast. For those who don't know me, I'll go through my journey a little bit here. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, lower middle class family. First member of my family to traditionally go to college. Out of college, I got into commercial real estate finance. It worked out really well. I was one of the youngest vice presidents of commercial real estate lending in St. Louis at the age of 25. During my time, I underwrote over $1 billion in commercial real estate deals. And then transitioned into full-time entrepreneurial real estate investing in 2013. When I got into real estate investing personally, I focused more on real estate rehabs, did some rentals and wholesales as I was trying to learn the wholesaling game. I quickly realized that the wholesaling side of the business was more scalable, focused on that heavy, and over the 6 years had exponential growth. In 2019, we will have purchased over 200 houses for wholesale, as well as running a real estate brokerage that'll do 60 million plus in transactions. We started and have since sold a residential property management company. We made a big transition into commercial real estate deals. We own and manage over 110,000 square feet of commercial space, as well as 60 plus residential doors. And the reason I go through all this for you guys is to get into the mission of this podcast, the real reason that I'm here. This is for next level thinkers. We're gonna be talking about the newest ideas, the most innovative stuff. We're gonna be talking about the 1% and 2% difference, the it factor, the edge, the stuff that really makes some investors great while other investors fail. We're gonna be digging deep into work-life balance, mindset. We're gonna be having interviews with some of the top folks in the industry, both in the residential and commercial real estate investing sectors. As well as high-level finance guys, maybe even tech guys that have scaled big businesses. If you want to be the best investor that you can be, and you want to get opened up to folks that are doing huge things, how they think, how they make decisions, how they process data, you're in the right spot. All right, guys, you guys are in for a great podcast today. We got John Martinez, national sales trainer, just absolute stud. We've taken his sales academy courses, and I've known him for a long, long time. He's always in the mix. He runs REI Sales Academy, reisalesacademy.com. Just an absolute fantastic guy. Hopefully you guys can get some great stuff out of it. I certainly did. I've known him for a while, and we've been involved in his courses and his training, and I even got some additional stuff that I didn't realize that I didn't already have. So here we go. Stay tuned. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Level Up Real Estate Investing Podcast. Very, very excited to be here with the man, the myth, John Martinez. How are you doing, John?
I am good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Running and gunning. We've got Christmas in 2 days here. So, by the time anyone hears this, it'll be after. But you guys can know that we're stretching it down to the wire, trying to get everything, trying to shoehorn as much as we can in before Christmas, before the new year. Thanks for making it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here, man.
Absolutely, I'm glad to have you. You're one of those guys that forever, every mastermind, every coaching program I went to, everyone's like, "Oh, you haven't taken the John Martinez training yet," and just foolishly and hard headed, I just hadn't quite gotten there, and then finally it's like, all right, this is silly. We got to do it. And then we did it. And man, it's been a game changer. So I can't thank you enough.
Yeah. Thanks for putting some faith in us.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, for the folks that don't know who you are, those random few, would you mind just doing a quick little intro or little information on yourself?
Sure. So for the last, I'm a sales guy, kind of grew up in corporate America, building and training sales teams. About 5 years ago, I launched a sales training business. And for almost that 5 years, we've been laser focused on the real estate investment space. So we work with investors and their sales teams, acquisition agents, acquisition managers, whatever you want to call them in your organization. We help them turn the leads that are coming in into deals. So it's basic sales training, How do we convert those leads? How do we negotiate the best price? That type of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and you've been strongly involved in the real estate sector for a long, long time, but you don't just do real estate training, correct?
Right.
Or do
So
you,
well, in sales training, we have trained in about 4 dozen industries. I've let go of all those industries personally, except for real estate investment. There are some people on my team who train in other industries now using our content, but I focus 100% on real estate myself.
okay. Yeah. And I knew that. I thought that you'd done a bunch of other stuff over the
Yeah.
years, but that makes sense. Yeah. So cool. So, I mean, that's fantastic. And obviously you're very closely tied into a lot of different
Yeah.
masterminds and other groups like that. But what has been some of like the bigger takeaways that you've gotten from being involved in these groups and as you've progressed and as you've kind of become bigger, like what are some of the bigger takeaways that you've seen recently, that weren't there before?
Yeah, so a couple immediately come to mind. Just the first macro one is when I started getting involved in mastermind groups, I realized that the only thing that kind of bound these successful investors together is that they were all action takers. I mean, they all had different exit strategies, they all had different personalities, they all had different skill sets and backgrounds, but they were all action takers. So that hasn't changed. That's always been the same.
Yeah.
But it's just something that I think is super important to get out there because a lot of people are on that edge of taking that next step. And I think it's important just to do it. What's changed over the last couple of years? So a lot of the conversation the last year or two has been centered around scaling up. And I'm going to give my unique perspective on it because I've seen a lot when it comes to scaling. And there's the right way and the wrong way to do it. And man, I can't tell you how many companies I've seen try to scale too quickly without having the right processes in place. And what happens there. So the teams I've worked with that were just trying to massively scale without having their processes dialed in first, they hired a bunch of people, they increased marketing spend, and all that really happened is they increased overhead, they increased the complexity of their business. They didn't get out of their business. They just, went from buying houses to managing the people buying houses and dispositioning and all this.
Yeah.
So the net effect of all of it, if they didn't have processes in place, was just more risk, more overhead, more complexity, more frustration. I had a few conversations where it was like, I'm spending now 100, 150K a month. I'm not netting anything more. And life is hell because now I'm not doing what I love doing. I'm just managing like this massive team of people and there's people falling off and I'm hiring. And it was just, they weren't enjoying life. And then there's the people who stayed small, made sure everything was really dialed in and then expanded it. And, those teams did very, very well. So that's kind of the big takeaway I've had over the last year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing a resurgence of it. I've been talking to a lot of folks. We were just in Vegas for Boardroom Mastermind last week, and we're talking to some folks. And obviously, I think that scenario will continue. Right? It's like it just kind of goes in waves.
Yeah.
And a change in the economy will have an impact. But we've been seeing a lot of that, and it's. I think people think, okay, well, I'm good at sales. I'm good at buying houses. But I need to. Or I don't want to do this, so I'm just going to get out of it. But they don't add that other layer of, hey, you have to actually learn how to be a good manager too. You have to set the precedent. You have to have those systems, and to be a good manager, you have to convey to the employee, whether it be a salesperson, a dispo person, a back office person, like you have to convey what actually the expectations and what the needs are of that person. And that's where I think a lot of people fail.
Yeah, I think that's a big missing piece. Now is we have everything we need except for there's a vacuum in that spot on how do you actually manage people and the culture and grow a team from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean that's a big piece that we've been trying to talk to folks and making sure, because without that, I mean the easiest part, I shouldn't say, the single easiest part is to create the systems and processes, which most folks don't do. But in reality, like that is a tangible thing, right? You document what you've always done. Hopefully you can kind of create some videos and some training processes around it. You actually implement it and then have some follow-up material associated with it. So even though it's almost never done, I think that's the single easiest part. But then actually making sure you're hiring the right person, doing the personality profiling, making sure that you guys can align properly and actually kind of have the relationship that's necessary for an employer-employee. And then having the culture is probably the other piece that it makes it even more complicated, right? Making sure that there's the positive environment, making sure that you have some overarching, I guess, goals and what's the right word here? Kind of
Alignment, really.
yeah, alignment, values, like what you will stand for and what you won't stand for and what has to happen and things like that. And I think that's been a really difficult piece. We've been able to get over it, but we kind of jumped in the deep end with 2 feet and then figured it out. But I think most folks probably either get frustrated, get priced out, or just decide, hey, you know what, I'll just stay small because it's not for me, without actually getting to the next step. Is that similar to what you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that. So even that can be subdivided in 2 categories. You've got the whole, like, the vision of the company and the motivation and how to take that and dovetail it into your employees' motivation so they're motivated to achieve the same goals. And that's pretty tough. But then there's this whole other group of systems and processes that nobody talks about, which has to do with managing people, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the expectations? How are we measuring you? What happens if you don't measure up? How do you ask for help? How do we help you improve? If you don't measure up repeatedly, what's the next step? That's a whole other set of systems and processes usually no one thinks about until it's too late. They go, I've got this employee that's not performing. What do I do?
Right?
So you've got those 2 things, the motivation, the vision, and then the actual management systems and processes. And that, again, that's where I see most companies getting stuck and either, reverting backwards or just giving up altogether.
So in that scenario, I mean, I know what we've done, but and you and I haven't really talked about this too terribly much, but well, maybe not at all. But like, what do you recommend in that scenario? What have you seen be the greatest, had the highest level of success with the folks that you work with?
Yeah, so I think it's before you hire, taking the time to really design that process. So again, you have to have the process before the employee, because how are you going to set expectations with the employee if you don't have the process already built?
Mm-hmm.
So I think just those basic questions I asked, right? What are expectations for each role? How will you be measured? How will you be managed? What happens if you do hit the expectations? What happens if you don't? Where do you go to get some help? And just outlining all those things, which you could do in a matter of minutes, really, but outlining those before you hire employees would just take so much frustration out of the whole thing.
Sure.
Because when you try to create that stuff on the fly, you're then thinking, well, what kind of expectations did they have coming in? What have I told them? Am I changing the game on them? Is it fair? Well, if it's not fair, can I really hold them accountable? And that just makes any situation, any management situation, really, really hairy.
Yeah. So you're thinking through that unique circumstance while you're trying to come up with more overarching scenario, more overarching policy, and then second guessing it and adding, emotion and what they might think, to the process when it otherwise shouldn't have been part of the process at all.
Man, that's exactly it. When you don't have that clearly outlined, emotion takes over all the time. I was talking to two business owners in the space a week or 2 ago, and it was that exact scenario. Hey, John, we've got 3 salespeople. 2 of them are not performing. What do we do? And as we talk through that scenario, what do you have out? What do you already have outlined? Nothing. So what have you been doing? Just going with our gut, but then we're emotional about it, and we're letting them get away with stuff, and we don't want to fire them because we didn't set proper expectations, and they were just stuck.
Yeah.
So you're right. That's exactly what happens. Emotion takes over, and you're not making the best decisions for your business.
Which, a good business person would put themselves in a scenario where they're trying to take emotion out of it as much as possible in any other scenario. Yeah. And then now you're stuck in a position that you're making a decision based on emotion. It's
because you realize you're the one that goofed up. You realize like, oh, I should have had this stuff in place for you. Now I didn't. It's my fault. So you feel responsible, and you don't make the right decisions there. And it's sometimes impossible at that point to implement the right processes.
So I cut you off. Sorry, say that again.
Yeah. So I lost my train of thinking, but anyways, that was my main point. I got out everything I wanted to mention there.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's two things, right? Because most of the time, folks are going to find themselves there unless they've put all the right steps into process. But
Yeah.
to be honest, most people who are listening to this are probably going to find themselves there at some point if they haven't already. So how do you readjust or how do you reset in that scenario? What would you propose?
Yeah, I've had to do it before, and for me, it's just we always operate from complete transparency and just being completely honest. So whenever I had to do it, I took responsibility and would just say, "Hey, my fault. I should have had these things in place. I didn't think I needed them, or I thought I could come up, learn as I went. That was wrong. Now we're in a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
So now here's how we're going to operate forward, and then you also have to frame it how it's going to help them, right?
Yeah.
So hey, you're not performing, not your fault. I didn't set out the right guidelines. You want to be successful. I obviously want you to be successful. We're on the same page. So let's put in place the guidelines for expectations. So you know exactly what we need out of you, where to go get help if you need it. So you know exactly what to do if you need to get help, exactly how we're measuring you. So you know exactly what we're looking at. You're not guessing. Are they looking at how often I'm working, how hard I'm working, how long I'm working on results here or there. And then, hey, if we don't measure up, what do we have in place to kind of help you out? Where do you go and what's that process going to look like? So I think you got to come at it from just a place of honesty and responsibility.
Yeah.
And then also let them know how it's going to help them. Not, hey, I want to penalize you or fire you or something like that. So here's how I'm going to do it. Because ultimately we want to be successful. The worst case scenario is we've got to replace someone. Best case scenario is we can coach them up and we don't have to go through that process again. So just getting on the same page there and rolling everything out.
No, that's huge. And honestly, look, there's been scenarios where it hasn't worked the way we'd wanted it to. But in this scenario that you're talking about, like where we kind of come back to the drawing board and say, okay, well, here's what happened. Here's where we are.
Yeah.
Take ownership. And here's, if it's a time to kind of determine what the pay structure would have been or the bonus would have been otherwise. But, here's what we're going to do to set the right presentation or expectations and compensate for what's been done. But going forward, here's the break. Going forward, here's what the new expectations are. Here's what your new goals and responsibilities are going to be. Here's how we're going to track it, to your point, and kind of go down through all of those bullet points. And then, hey, are we on the same page? Can we jump start from here and kind of start over from a clean slate and say, hey, this is it? Or can't we? Right. Hopefully we can, and hopefully it's a win-win for everybody. And if what we found, in my limited experience, but you probably have dealt with this substantially more, but more times than not, if you're frustrated as the owner and as the manager about the rollout, about the outcome, about the results, and if they are even halfway the right person, that they're probably frustrated about not having the guidance and the clarity that they would want anyway. They're kind of in the same boat. It's a lose-lose.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. They're feeling the exact same stuff. People want to know if they're doing a good job or not, right?
Yeah.
And how they're being measured and all that kind of stuff. And I think the bottom line really is that there's different ways to grow in the real estate investment space, but you're really limited if you don't pull people into it because it's such a people-intensive industry. There's so much automation, marketing, the types of deals you're doing, and the exit strategies, all that you can make more and more money, but there's a ceiling at some point where in order to grow, you need more people. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're talking about today is super important because, if that ceiling, if you don't get any income in the business that you want, that's awesome. But I know a lot of people in this space are really driven, and that's just going to be part of it. No matter what they do, they're going to have to pull some people in at some point, and they're going to have to know how to manage them.
100%. Yeah. And we were just talking about this the other day, but oftentimes, and specifically in the industry that we're in, there's a lot of folks chasing shiny nickels too. Like, oh, I want to do this and that, and that, and we were just joking about it earlier, but without being able to pull people in, have them see your vision, coach them, train them in the right direction, that absolutely is not going to be the case because you haven't even kind of solidified your current business, your current structure before you even start looking at or thinking about add-ons,
Yeah, I agree.
So, so that's great. So now we know how, or for the folks listening, they have some idea of what not to do, and what to do. And then if they find themselves in that scenario, how to reset, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
huge piece. So like everyone that's listening, that's like, oh crap, that's exactly where I'm at. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Reset, redefine expectations. Before you reset, would you recommend, like, so if you're listening to this from an outside perspective and you realize, oh man, that is the exact scenario that we're in. You know, we just hired a few folks. We want to be better. We want to do more. We want to scale, but we are exactly in that boat. We hired these folks and they're out there running because I hired for the stuff I didn't want to do, or I hired for positions that I thought they'd be better at, but I don't have these expectations. I don't have these different parameters lined up. So would you recommend they immediately call a meeting with these individuals and say, hey, let's reset? Or would you recommend they take a week, really plan out the strategy of what they want for all of that and let them know, hey, by the way, we're going to have a meeting in about a week. We got to go over a couple of things. There's an adjustment that needs to be made because of X, Y, and Z here. This is coming, but this is what it would be.
Yeah, yeah. I think the second option is going to be the best. Obviously, you want to let them know you're addressing it as soon as possible. You don't want them to feel like they've done anything wrong. So, the last thing you want is an employee thinking you might getting fired in a week, right? So the way you phrase that's super important.
Yeah.
But just let them know, hey, we're adjusting processes to get better results, working on your behalf. So, things are easier for year two. So we'll circle back with you and get those processes in place, because you don't want to have that meeting and have nothing to roll out, to have no thought put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is important when you have that meeting to get their feedback, because the more they feel, because number one, they probably have some valuable feedback because they see stuff in the field that's happening that you might not see.
100%.
And number two, because even if that's not the case, which it probably will be the case, even if it's not the case, the more they're involved and the more buy-in they have, the more attached they're going to be to the implementation. So you want the buy-in too. So I would definitely have a plan, but with the rollout, I would get their input as well, because you might adjust that plan as you're rolling it out based on that feedback, and you want them bought in.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I love that. And like I said, we've been there probably more times than I'd like to count. But it took us a few times to get lumped on the head to really realize it. But I'm sure, and especially from some of the folks that we coach through the masterminds and kind of talk through people through, is that scenario runs rampant, and it's not going away anytime soon. It's there, and everyone wants to scale, so everyone just goes out there and does. So for folks that are doing a few deals, 20 deals a year, something like that, they're kind of on their own, and they haven't gotten to that point yet where they've made that mistake. Well, now they know what to do, but what would you recommend be their first hire? Would you recommend them go out and get someone to do more of the acquisition and disposition? Or would you recommend someone like that to go out and backfill with some kind of back office, given what you know about, kind of the sales training side and the coaching side as it relates to that?
Yeah. If I just wanted to pump up my business, I'd say sales for sure, and I'll train them. But that's really not the case. The way I look at it is it's not the same for every business. It's going to depend on what your strong skill sets are, what you need the most help with. I mean, if you just hate talking to people, right, and you're terrible at sales, it might make sense to hire someone who is really good at sales, and then you focus on just feeding them leads, so you can refocus that energy and time on the marketing piece, and then maybe some of the back office stuff. But maybe that's your sweet spot. Maybe, you've been doing it now for a couple of years. You don't even have to think about it. You close the closable deals, and in order to grow, you're going to need more revenue. You're going to need all that kind of stuff. So maybe at that point, it doesn't make sense to take you out of that role, and maybe the company might take a step back. It might make sense to bring someone in to help you do more of that, right? If that's your superpower, well, how do I get in front of more people? How do we vet these people? And in that case, it might be a marketing person or a lead manager, or the combination of the two. So I think you really got to look at what you're doing, what you want to continue doing, what you're really good at, and go at it from that perspective.
Okay. No, that's some great advice. And you hit on a couple of points there that I'd like to dig into, because I've also read a lot of your comments. We're in a lot of the same Facebook groups, and I see a lot of, just kind of more generic questions, but also questions that are deeper that have responses. And I've got a specific one in mind as I'm asking this to you. But so if you're working with the sales group and they're saying, okay, well, here's kind of where we are and here's where we want to go and all of that.
Yeah.
But we want to define out, like, we want to define out what the best workflow for a real estate investor's like sales process. So they do the marketing and a lead comes in.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the jump start. How would you, in a perfect world, with everything you know about the sales training side,
Right.
how would you process map out all the next steps to property under contract from that
Yeah.
point?
So from that, what I would do is speed wins. So I want to have the conversation as quick as possible. I want to close the deal as quick as possible. Because the more time that passes, your competition has a chance to get in and win that deal.
Yeah.
So lead comes in. If it was me, I'd have lead managers manage everything. Good lead managers who know what they're doing, who know how to qualify a lead. Do we have any? And I wouldn't over qualify either. If we got a chance with it, if there's equity, if there's, just some very basic qualifiers, I'm passing it over to the acquisition manager, who immediately is going to either take over the call or call them back and go through the sales conversation and try to close it on the phone.
Yeah.
If anything at that point is not, is just on the edge, I would have that AM go out there to try to attempt to close the deal face to face. After that, I'd put them into an automated, basically an automated nurturing sequence, wait for them to raise their hand. And then whenever they'd raise their hand and say, I'm interested in talking again, pass them back to the lead manager and repeat that process. I think it's important, more and more people close over the phone now, and it's almost the exact 99% the same conversation over the phone or face to face. I would try to close over the phone, and if not possible, I'd go out there and I'd lock down the deal. That would probably be the best use of the resources, best use of talent, and probably increase conversions as much as you can.
Okay. No, that's great to hear. So, and I've been talking to a lot of folks that have been converting to more over the phone, and I'm 99% sure this is a limited belief, but Missouri's the show me state, St. Louis is, I know you're in Springfield, but in St. Louis, it's a skeptical group. So in the back of my mind, I have a hard time kind of coming to that realization. I know it has to be done. I know it's there. So, and I know it's limited belief, but with that, so how does someone go from the sales perspective? How does someone go from transitioning to getting in front of clients for every single deal to converting over to taking them, to closing deals over the phone? What are those first few steps in that process?
Real simple, actually. I would just have my to start the handoff process. I'd have the acquisition manager call the prospect before he or she meets him, which they might be doing already just to confirm appointments, maybe not. But I'd have them call and get into the conversation. And if it feels good, keep the conversation going. And if they get to the end of the sales conversation, just do a soft close and see if they can close a deal. That way, you're not killing deals you don't need to kill, and you're just kind of letting the flow of the call pull you in the right direction. And what'll happen is if you start closing deals over the phone, confidence is going to grow. You're going to start going after it a little bit harder. And if not, then you could just say, hey, we're not closing over the phone. So that's how I do it. I'd hand off to confirm it, get into as much of the conversation as I can. If you get all the way through the sales conversation, attempt to close it. Hey, what would you say if I blah, 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 and just attempt. Then you could always still go out there, right? So that's how I'd start to ease into it instead of, I think the wrong way to do it is would be to go, hey, we're closing over the phone now. Because I think it would shake things up too quickly, too much, and you'd probably get some negative impact from it.
Yeah. So then do you also I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you evaluate it based on motivation, right? So the higher the motivation, the more you're pushing over the phone in general, or do you kind of say, hey, I'm going to do the same tactic on the soft approach and then see how it kind of rolls out? Would you do that independent of motivation level?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're always feeling out motivation level. So, and you always kind of start with motivation. I wouldn't use it as the only qualifier of whether or not to try to close the deal on the phone. But, and I know our sales process. With the sales process we teach, before we ever closed, we would be going into motivation. So I think you would know going into it whether the motivation was there or not. I would say regardless of whether it's face-to-face or over the phone, if you get through the conversation and there's like zero motivation, I'm probably not closing very hard. And if I do attempt to close and there's a bite,
Yeah.
I'm going to try to figure out what I missed and circle back to motivation with something like, that actually really surprises me. As we were talking, I couldn't figure out a single reason why, you would sell your house anytime soon to me or to anyone else anyway. I didn't see the need there. I didn't see the want.
Yeah.
Can you fill me in on and I'm right back into motivation. So it's kind of a trick question. You would know the motivation before closing.
Oh man, that's solid. I mean, I've listened to your stuff and obviously been in your seminars for a while,
Yeah.
but man, just hearing it come back out, it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what you would do. That's you hit it. Well, and I mean, just that pitch you kind of threw out there is fantastic, right? Just kind of address the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. Just hey, I can't see why would that be the case? Tell me. And then now they're almost pitching to you why they want to do it again,
Right. And when you do make that offer, you want to be able to just nail whatever their motivation was. Hey, this is obviously important to you. We could go over real estate stuff until, the sun goes down. But the truth of the matter is, it sounds like all you really want to know is, how do I help you get out of this situation or move towards this situation? So I'm going to hit that really hard and then answer any questions you have. Right. So then you could tailor that offer right to them, and they can make the decision, yes, this gets me there, or no, it doesn't get me there. And that alone will increase conversion rates.
Absolutely. No, that's great. Because obviously we're working really hard to get in front of the most motivated folks, and that's just what we do every day. But at the same point, given that we've been around for a while and we have a lot of exposure, and we have a brokerage as well, and there's other business assets, and we're kind of big picture, long-term thinkers as it relates. We're not in it for the short game. That we get a lot of folks that are, transitioning to assisted living, or, they just have a home that's 30 years or they hasn't been updated in 30 years. I mean, they might own it outright. So having to sell it right away isn't their biggest motivation. They're not super motivated. They want to sell more than they need to sell. Right. So it's a different type of sales process, but oftentimes those are homes in better areas that have maybe higher upsides and whatnot, but it's an entirely different conversation. So, and what I would assume is that with older folks that are less, maybe tech savvy, that are a little bit kind of slower paced, that generation might have a little bit harder time accepting or getting to the realization that an offer could be made over the phone versus coming to see the hard asset. Is that similar to what you
I 100% agree with you. I mean, we've got to cater to our to the market, to our clientele. And, in our sales training, that's what we call deal killers, right? There might be that belief that, hey, I want to feel like I'm getting the best deal possible. And I do not believe that if someone's making an offer over the phone, that I'm getting the best deal possible. And if they feel like they're not getting the best deal possible, they're not going to sign. So you're going to have to do one of two things. You're going to have to, sell them on the fact that they're getting the best offer possible, or you're going to have to go out there. But until that fear is dealt with, they're not doing a deal. So I think you're exactly right. There's different ways to accomplish it. But again, I think the root cause here that we're addressing is, if there's a fear that I'm not getting the best deal possible, I'm not taking action, and that has to be addressed.
Oh, I love that. That's huge. Well, cool. Well, changing gears a little bit here, because I think that was just great stuff, but we'll kind of go in a bit of a different angle, so I'm not taking too much of your day here. Yeah. So obviously you're fantastic on the sales training side, and there's so many aspects to it. There's so many little pieces. But what do you think it is that you do differently that's 1% to 2% better, like that edge, that thing that really makes you kind of unique and more successful than so many other sales trainers out there that just aren't able to hit at the same level that you do? What is your niche, your unique variable?
I think a lot that we've talked about, so just purely from a business perspective, we concentrate heavily, and when I say we, it's me, my wife, and we've got one assistant. So it's a very small operation, but we concentrate on the systems. We're always looking at the systems. What can we do better? What can we shortcut? And that's all, basically that's what my job is nowadays is I look at our systems and I'm just tweaking them and modifying them and making them more and more effective, while removing, any moving pieces that I can, any complications that I can. So we've gotten really good at that. So there's for example, in our organization, there is no human interaction until someone asks to become our client. And only then they self-book a call. It's only a 15-minute call. My wife takes it. She's not a salesperson. That conversation is extremely dialed in. The process that happened afterward is automated. An email goes out with a special offer. And then the next bit of human interaction is when they join my group call. So from a business perspective, we've got that really dialed in from the marketing, conversion, and delivery standpoint. Now, from the actual sales training, I think what makes, there's two or three very unique things that have led to our success. Number one is we're niched in real estate. And it's hard. I've been through lots of sales trainings in my career, and it's sometimes really hard to translate what you've learned into the actual conversations you're having. There's a translation that has to take place. How do I phrase this? What words do I use? How does this come out? So because we're niched in real estate investment, I think we can use the same wording, the same scenarios, and we make that we do the translation, so we're not forcing salespeople to take raw information, just core concepts and strategies and translate it. Mm-hmm. Next, I think what makes us really unique is the way we train. We spend the first 3/4 of every call talking about why a strategy is important. And we use what's called the inside out methodology, which is kind of what we've coined internally here, where we make people realize how they think, what they do, and come to the realization of, every time I'm in this situation, here's what I do. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's how I'm reacting. And once they own that and they understand what they do from a human perspective, we then kind of pivot and go, well, do you think your prospect's doing the same thing? And there's this realization that, yes, of course they think the same way. And once they get that buy-in, the third piece is we give very, very simple action items. So at the end of every call, there's 1 or 2 questions to ask or 1 or 2 things to say, and that's it. So the combination of all that, being niched, the inside out methodology, and then at the very end, once we get complete buy-in and everyone completely understands why whatever we're teaching on that call is important, here's just the 1 or 2 questions that you have to ask to actually accomplish it. Can you do that? Yeah, of course I can. So those are the things that make us unique.
I love it. I love it. So there's a lot there, but I think that's a very succinct way of putting it. What the inside out method? That's really kind of trying to get inside. Yeah. It's like on reverse engineering how they would handle it and then applying it forward, right?
Right. Because, when I did a lot of sales training earlier, and even the way I started sales training, there was always this mindset of it's us and it's them. It's the salespeople and we're against the prospects, and we don't understand why they do the things we do. We don't get why they, sometimes won't tell us the truth or why they won't give us a no. And it's like there's this complete disconnect. So with this methodology, you understand your prospect. It's like let me think of one of the things we teach. One of the things we teach is just setting clear expectations at the beginning of any conversation. So we go through a whole series of exercises about what people do when they don't have proper expectations, right? One is like, hey, if a buddy asked you a favor, like, hey, can you do me a favor? You do nothing else. Would you take the favor? And then most people are like, well, I'd probably want to know like when and what they want, what the favor is, and some of those details. It's like, okay, so are you more likely or less likely to do the favor? Well, less likely. What questions do you need answered? Well, I need to know what it is and what exactly it's going to require of me. So, okay, so time frame and agenda, exactly what you're going to do. Yeah, so we go through a few of those, and I go, so how reluctant are you going to be to commit to that favor just knowing nothing? Very unlikely. Okay, do you think your prospect, when you call a lead back, is going to be likely or unlikely to commit to your appointment if they don't know how long it's going to take or what's going to happen? Probably very unlikely, just like me. Okay, so what do you think you should cover? Well, they probably want to know what we're going to do and how long it's going to take and when it's going to happen. Okay, so does it make sense when you book the appointment to say, hey, by the way, these things usually take 30 to 45 minutes. It's pretty laid back. We're going to walk the property. Love to take the tour. That's going to allow me to put together the best possible offer for you. And that I'll calculate the offer. I'll tell you how it's structured. I'll give it to you. If you love it, awesome. We'll talk about next steps. If not, no big deal. We accomplished what we need to. Do you think if you did that, you get more appointments taken? And when you went to those appointments, they'd be more relaxed? Yes. So that is just a sample of the inside out methodology. You understand how you react into certain situations. Now we understand our prospects. Now we put a tool in place to deal with whatever we're talking about.
Man, that's huge. That'll get it done. Yeah. That's a really, really cool way to look at it. So cool. So kind of switching gears again a bit.
Yeah,
What,
yeah,
what, so where we are now kind of in the market
yeah,
and with the kind of the cost of leads these days
yeah,
and the, just the cost of manpower and what you hear a lot of folks talking about are margins getting squeezed
yeah,
a bit, you know, how is it, and honestly, I think I know the answers. I'm saying this because we went through so many different pieces, but how is it that folks can kind of do that inside out method and kind of
yeah.
dig through that or kind of pre-screen sellers, maybe
Right.
based on the recorded calls or whatever, to get as much information and really, I guess, increase the knowledge that you would have on that seller and
Yeah,
increase the amount of information you can kind of go into that appointment or that call with, or
yeah,
and have the highest probability of being able to get that deal done with the greatest amount of information and know the, I guess, apply
yeah,
that inside out method prior
yeah.
to actually getting there. Have the most amount of psychological information or
Right.
kind of profile them as much as possible. Do you think about that at all?
Yeah, yeah, and probably have a slightly different perspective than most. Of course, we want as much information as possible going into a sales call because the more information we're equipped with, the better equipped we're going to be to solve their problems, close a deal, talk about what we do and how we do it. All those kinds of things increase conversion rates. There's a massive danger, though, to overqualifying prospects up front. Um, Investors that have been out there buying, no matter how many deals they do, if I was to ask them, hey, are there any appointments you went on or any sales calls you did, whether it's face to face or over the phone or whatever, where based on the initial conversation, you thought, no way this deal is happening. And then it ends up being a sweetheart deal. Every investor ever would say, yeah, I'm surprised all the time. And I could ask the opposite. Have you ever been on appointments where you thought this one is easy, this is perfect for them, it's perfect for us, it checks all the motivation boxes, like done deal, and it doesn't happen? And they say, yeah, that happens all the time too. Well, if we overqualify leads up front, that's going to happen a lot. If we try to just pick out the appointments that we know are going to have a high likelihood of close, we're going to often be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because the longer conversations bring out so many more details than a short qualification or lead management type of call. So as I look at lead management, I'm only looking at one thing initially. So initially, I'm looking at, can the deal be done? Do we like the location? Do we like the property? Is there some equity or as much equity as we need, depending on our strategy, what we need to buy it at? And if that's the case, I'm going. Now, if you end up in a situation where you have more leads than you can hit, then you got to start adding some qualifiers. So the first qualifier I'd ask about is probably their motivation. Why in the world, are you even considering selling? And I'd start seeing, is there any sign of motivation whatsoever? Because there's really only 5 or 10 signs of motivation that lead to people for distressed sellers. And there's some non-distressed sellers, but there's fewer of those. So then I'd get into that conversation. But it's at that point where I'd probably stop and slow down and say, if I go deeper than this, I'm going to probably start overqualifying and I'm going to start missing deals. So at that point, that's a perfect point to work into the conversation we have earlier, where we'd say, hey, I've got too many leads. I don't want to overqualify, but I don't have the manpower. Maybe this is a point in time where I start doing some of these sales calls initially over the phone to try to recoup some of the time with the resources we have. And at that point, I'd probably switch to a hybrid model where we're trying to close over the phone and just hitting some of them face to face.
Mm-hmm. So just kind of tighten up the efficiency like you have with your business,
Yeah.
set up the systems and processes and kind of roll that out.
Yeah. I still, to this day, no matter how good the salesperson is, have never been able to see a salesperson who could pick out the deals from the non-deals from a 5 or 10 minute chat. It always plays out so differently on that conversation, and we can never predict it. So I really caution, we need some qualifiers, but I really caution against overqualifying.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, honestly, that's something we've been digging really deep into and thinking, just as cost per lead goes up, and there's been some new channels that have rolled out that have brought cost per lead down. But overall, as cost per leads have gone up and there's more competition and and margins have been squeezed a little bit, it's like, okay, well, how do we get the most out of it?
Yeah.
And not so much analyzing, trying to determine, is this a deal, but trying to get as much information and being able to um,
Yeah.
being able to cater directly to the seller,
Yeah.
and kind of profile kind of what quadrant they
Right.
would fall into, like, in a disc analysis
Makes
test
total
or something,
sense. Yeah. Makes
so that
total
you can
sense.
get to it a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah, and there's new softwares like AI stuff and all kinds of stuff, and you can that I think actually do I don't know the names of any of them, but I've been hearing a lot about AI programs that do exactly that, and
Yeah.
start off a type of profile so you know what your approach will be going in.
Hmm.
So that stuff's out there. I don't know a lot about it because it's so new.
Yeah.
But yeah, the more you know, the better going into it. And that's kind of, I think I took that conversation a little bit the wrong way. But yeah, collect as much data as possible. But I think that's going to have to do with technology. I think the technology today is what's going to allow us to dig in deep and figure that stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the predictive index kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
obviously after the Cambridge Analytica, which is
Hmm.
essentially this, right? Trying
Yeah.
to profile folks. But applying it, because there's few industries that you are direct to consumer, where it's kind of
Right.
business, B2C, that you're dealing with asset sizes of this type that have the
Yes.
profitability, and that you can almost directly deal with a decision maker, and folks are using more emotion than logic to make
Yes.
decisions. So it's a
Yeah.
very unique deal where that could apply a little
You
bit
nailed
more
it.
direct.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. And that's why I think that even with the iBuyers and those types of things, because of all those variables you put in place, there will always be a place for the human component. It doesn't mean that iBuyers aren't going to buy houses. It doesn't mean that they're not going to buy houses at deep discounts, but it
Mhm.
means that there's always going to be this pocket that needs that human interaction, and human interaction is going to win.
Mhm.
So I do think when the market changes, which it will at some point, who knows by how much or when, everyone has a guess. But whenever it changes, I think people who have that human component also locked in, the conversational part of all this are going to be the ones that are left standing. Uh, I think that will never go away in this industry.
100%, yeah, and especially and something that we've been digging into is the senior sector, folks that are
Yeah.
moving to senior assisted living. Obviously, senior living facilities are the fastest growing commercial real
Yeah.
estate asset class, and
Right.
10,000 baby boomers are retiring a day, and all these crazy stats you hear saying, okay, well that's that. Well, more times than not, especially folks going into private pay, where it's $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month to move into those facilities, they're more on a want to sell basis, but there's
Right.
equity there, there's value there. And more times than not, when the folks that are in a want to sell scenario, they're looking for that relationship. They're looking to feel good about it. They don't have to move at a certain
Right.
front. So,
I agree.
oftentimes, yeah, price isn't the sole variable. And that's kind of what
Right.
you're getting at there.
Yeah, because the data is a double-edged sword. Companies like Zillow and everything else, because when there is so much data, what do we yearn for? We yearn for, okay, I see prices of houses. I see I've got 14 choices, but once you're presented with all that, you just want some guidance from an expert. If I
Hmm.
buy a software for my business, I get online, I start doing some research, I'm overwhelmed, and what do I do? I immediately think, who knows about this stuff? Where can I go get some good advice? So
Exactly.
I think that just makes the need for that guidance, for that expertise, for that leadership just so much more important, where someone just says, I just want to find someone I can trust, and I want them to just work through the decision with me, and then essentially, give me some advice and point me in the right direction. And that's where the sales conversation is going today, is not
Hmm.
that they can't find the data. It's that they need an expert to say, hey, I'm looking at the whole thing. Here's what I recommend. You got a few choices. When you make these choices, here's a few things you need to think about, and just simplifying that whole decision-making process.
That's exactly it, right? Everyone feels that way. They get overwhelmed by the stuff they don't know, and they need someone to help point them in the right
Yeah,
direction and corral together. Like, no one's reinventing the wheel here. It's how do
right.
you kind of get there? Well, that's awesome. That's really, really good stuff. Um, I mean, that pretty well rolls it out here. Uh, it's been an awesome conversation. I think that stuff at the
Yeah,
end, something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I figured you'd have a pretty good input on. And obviously, iBuyers are the one variable that everyone's kind of scared of in our industry.
right.
But understanding the kind of the thought process of the seller, and kind of walking through those steps and understanding the sales cycle, and having enough information to be able to do the inside out method, I think is a key piece.
Yeah.
And
I agree 100%. I think, as technology and data and options increase, people are searching for guidance somewhere. And I think that's what the real estate investors who are making it in a big way are doing, is they're providing that guidance.
Absolutely. Well, hey, before we get off of here, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the REI. The
REI Sales Academy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's an online program. We just help investors and their sales teams turn leads into deals. So we just walk through the conversation, negotiating, how to roll out the offer, what questions you should be asking, where you want to guide the conversation, really all those little pieces to the sales process that increase your odds of closing every closable deal, and then also increase margins wherever you can, which is really becoming more and more important now, because you mentioned it a few times on this call. Lots of competition, leads are more expensive, so you can't really just willy-nilly just throw out an offer and if you just throw out an offer to everyone without any type of sales process or any thought behind what you're doing, you will not get enough deals. You'll not win enough deals to justify your marketing spend. So how am I going to beat my competition? How am I going to have them make the decision while they're still waiting on other investors to come in? And how do I win when I don't have the highest offer? Those are the main things we focus on in the REI Sales Academy.
100%, and it's worked great for us. We think about those variables all the time, and I kind of apply a lot of this stuff. And to your point, in a more competitive sales scenarios, you're trying to scale, you're trying to do more. The same tactics that worked worked 4 years ago when there was very little competition, or 2 years ago, or whatever it might be. As you kind of scale up, you've got harder and harder variables to get into. You do more deals while you're falling into more scenarios where are more situations that the sale might be more difficult. It might be different than it was before. You're just kind of running into new uncharted territory to some degree, or even folks that need to train up a sales staff, right? So that they're not the one training them all the time, to kind of learn the stuff that you may do every day, but you maybe aren't the best person to apply it to your sales team.
Yeah. Just making quantity of offers. There gets to a point where the quantity of offers you're making isn't enough to support your business, right? When you're just starting out, you can make 30, 40 offers a month, and enough people, just by sheer luck, without you doing anything else, is just going to say, all right, I guess that sounds good, let's do it. But as you start increasing overhead and all that kind of stuff, you need more than just those people who are going to do it, right? You need to start converting. You need to increase conversion rates to support the business, support the overhead, support the people, systems, and processes you put in place, or else you'll go under.
Absolutely. It's just too much competition and too many good folks out there, and folks getting better for you to stay the same and kind of do the old blind squirrel finds a nut theory. It's just not going to get you very far.
Yeah, I agree with you, man.
Well, absolutely. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, John. Anything that I can do for you, or anything that you need help with, or anything along those lines?
Man, I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me on. I love this podcast. I do a lot of podcasts, but I love how we just the conversation kind of meandered and we took it wherever it needed to go. I had a good time, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. Best of luck to you. Have a great Christmas.
You too. Bye-bye.
See you. Wow, that was one hell of a podcast. John Martinez really laid it down. We talked about some fantastic stuff. Talked about building the team, scaling up your business, obviously, what to do, what not to do, specifically what not to do. That was a big, big piece. And then there's the other variable about what do you do when you realize that you're in it and you're doing it wrong, right? Which majority of us have been. We've all been in that spot. So we kind of dig into that. Hopefully you guys get some really good stuff out of those pieces. Talk about sales training and building your culture. Specifically talk about profiling sellers, profiling the individuals that you're working with, or understanding kind of where they're at, kind of doing almost like a reverse engineering on that. He's got some specific details that relates to that. Talks about closing over the phone, when to do it, how to do it, what to evaluate when you're kind of getting to that scenario. And then we discussed building your sales workflow. He's an expert at this. So, hey, the lead comes in. What do you do next all the way until the property's under contract? So John kind of digs into what that sales workflow looks like for him and kind of what he would do if he was building it out right now. So hopefully you guys got some great stuff, or you have some good stuff coming. Stay tuned to the next episode. Hey guys, as always, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Bottleneck Real Estate Virtual Assistants. These guys are fantastic. We've been using them for years in our business. They've really helped us scale. Hopefully you guys like them as much as we do. If you want to get in touch, it's bottleneckrealestate.com, bottleneckrealestate.com, and I think you will be very happy with them. If you got some good quality content out of that, if you think it would help anybody, please go to iTunes or SoundCloud or whoever you're listening to this on and subscribe to the podcast. Also, please give us a 5-star rating. It really helps get us out there. If you do subscribe and give us a 5-star rating, take a screenshot of it, email it over to info@robertheider.com, Robert, Heyder.com, and register for you guys to win a free one-on-one coaching session with myself or one of our guests. They were nice enough to give up some of their time, so thank you for that. Also, please follow us on social media, Robert_Heyder at Instagram, Robert_Heyder at Instagram. We'll drop some really quality content there. Also, I almost forgot, if you guys want a free commercial real estate guide and commercial real estate analysis tool, just go to the website, robertheider.com, fill out that brief little form, and we'll email that over to you. It's a really, really good tool just to be able to analyze deals quickly, understand kind of what's going on, see if it's actually a deal. All right, guys, thanks. Until next one.